right, so welcome everybody. Today I have the honor of discussing some great topics with Kamar Nomani. He is an author, he is a security architect, he is a cybersecurity instructor. He's living in France, beautiful, hopefully sunny France today. And he is the author of a great book, Mastering Cloud Security Posture Management, CSPM by Pact. And I really enjoyed it. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Yetra. Thank you for inviting me and looking forward to have a conversation. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, for those of us who don't know you yet, can you take a minute and just describe your professional background and how you ended up writing a book on cloud
Yeah.
security?
Thank you. That's an interesting question. To your audience, to everyone who don't know me, my name is Kamar Nomani. I'm from India, and I've been working in cybersecurity, IT technologies for over a decade now. And last 2 years, in July 2022, I moved to France with this new opportunity. And I was prior to that, I was working for a company called Sophos, antivirus company, into their product security architecture and design uh, role. And when I moved in here, it's a new country, the language that I don't know. I don't have friends, family, and even a lot of time that we don't know what to do. And there is this project which has been pending for like 3 4 years. Packet reached out to me previously as well to collaborate and potentially writing some book, and which couldn't happen because of a lot of involvement. Luckily or coincidentally, the moment I moved to Paris and spent 2 3 months, someone from Packet reached out again. Hey, do you think we can uh, find some time to discuss about it? And I was also in the way to find out what should I do. I don't have my friends, don't have family. If we go out, we don't understand the language, and what do I do? Okay, that's a good way to spend some time on research and think about some title. And that's how it started. And then I started thinking of the title. The one thing that came up most evidently is the CSPM, and we'll talk about it. So that's the idea of CSPM came in because of my background. I started as a cloud security operations engineer, and so I come with a lot of operations and SOC background, where I see the real problem where the engineer face and what is the reason behind it. Eventually, gradually moved into the architecture role. So I know the journey, and that's how I see the pain. And I thought, why not bringing something like this? Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So, that actually is a good hack. Like, if you have a lot of projects to do and you don't get the time, just relocate to a different country, different language, and then you'll have more time. So great. Actually, it is like a 400 plus page book. Was that the design from the from the start, or did you grow the book as you started writing?
It came like really organically because the when I wrote outline, I thought of at high level how much which topic I want to address, and then the outline of the book, what when we were thinking brainstorming, is almost same apart from one or two chapter got redesigned and rephrased, but the content, that how long it would be, I had no idea. Like when you do with the big publisher, you also have to declare that each chapter, then the headings, subheadings, how much time, and the objective of each chapter. It's really lengthy process writing book with some big publishers, and I had no idea. When I did the commitment and then I realized the number of checks it goes through and all those, I realized I'm not sure if I will be able to finish the book or not, the kind of process it was going through. But that also gives a lot of clarity on the topic, that what, as an audience, as an engineer, whoever is the or the audience for this book would like to read. As and I will always switch from writing to sitting the other side and see, as an engineer, I face this problem, and how would I like somebody to come and tell me to write? So it really eventually grown, and the length of the topic dependent on thinking about who, as in this chapter, who would be the main, the audience for it? Is it the engineer specific, it's the troubleshooting specific, or is it decision maker making specific? And thinking about that, it grown and it went on. And I had also no idea it will go up to like 450 plus pages. But yeah, that's how it went.
Nice, nice. Well, I like the book because it starts from zero, basically, even for decision makers or security architects who are not so much hands-on, but more like what are the concepts? You really stack it nicely, you build it up nicely, so well done. But that brings us, of course, to some foundational concepts. And let's start with the key question, like what is cloud security posture management and what are the benefits?
Although we have discussed this in detail in one or two chapter about what is cloud security, but just to summarize, when it comes to posture, it's about knowing how your cloud is doing. And it's important for any customer, whether it's a small company or a big company, to understand what's there in their cloud. Like because every company starts like you open the door, you allow your IT engineers or different department to get into cloud and start building. And when they start building, because cloud brings a lot of possibilities to explore machine learning, database, storage, AI, and hundreds and hundreds of services, it is evident that you have opened the door and people from your organization have started building different solution, different services and leveraging learning, but at the same time you have no idea that how much risk you are bringing, because it's important. The very first thing is really important to understand that who is responsible. There is a myth around it, and we can discuss. So overall, it comes from the responsibility. Cloud security posture management, if I summarize, it's like a way to protect the cloud assets, because when it comes to understanding the responsibility, it's always the identity and the data is the responsibility of the customers. There are two way of looking at cloud. Is one is off the cloud and the other is in the cloud. When it comes to off the cloud, it's the provider, Microsoft, AWS, Alibaba, Oracle, any cloud provider, like the building, the infrastructure, the data center, everything, it's their responsibility. But what you keep inside the cloud, like it's like renting an apartment. Like the building infrastructure is the owner's responsibility, but if you forget to put the lock when you're living outside and somebody barges in, it's not the owner's responsibility, it's a tenant's responsibility. So it's cloud security or a cloud computing is basically a sharing of the resources which is hosted or owned by somebody else, but you got to responsible of understanding the responsibility of what you need to protect of. And it's always a data identity and what you keep inside that repository or the cloud is your responsibility. And CSPM address that topic in very well detailed. And there's this technology, there are tools that have been developed, keeping the Gartner's idea of CSPM, that when it comes to customer sides of responsibility, how to protect, how to see, and you can't protect what you can't see. The first thing is, so the very first thing is to gain the visibility of your cloud infrastructure. What kind of data, what kind of resources, what kind of services are being used in your cloud? And once you see that, then you also see the risk, you see the misconfiguration. And CSPM address that in a very well manner. And that is what CSPM is. It's a technology supported by different tools and to protect your responsibility of cloud security as a customer.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I like the term security posture management, like a
Yeah,
posture, like if I'm not sitting right, my posture is bad, I will have
true.
effects afterwards. Huh? Same with security posture. If you don't have a well-designed system in place, you will get issues later on. And cloud security posture management is tailored to the
True.
cloud. I like that. So what are then, would you say, are the key benefits? Let's say you're a CISO and you need to defend budget for a CSPM. What are the
So
key
the first
benefits
thing,
there?
as I mentioned, is the visibility. It's important to understand what is being used. And it's not only from security as a CISO, it's also from the budget perspective. How much is being used? Is it really required? They're doing the balance, like when you get in details, you get the visibility of everything. Let's take an example of servers or database. If somebody is just spinning up with their infrastructure code 20 different servers with the premium, let's say hard disk, and then you check the monthly bills, CSPM typically does not deep dive into the cost perspective of it, but it creates a lot of insights to understand that whether this particular server is being utilized 20% or 2% or 1%. If something is really, really underutilized, as a CISO, if he understands or she understands the cost versus usability, you can really switch down and minimize as per your usage, because cloud brings the agility. You can, if you are not using it, you can really minimize it and you can save those costs. So it's not only about security at the CISO level, at the budget decision making level. It's important to see what is being used and how it is being used. The second is the misconfiguration. Who is responsible of what? The inventory. The CSPM brings the inventory list. It's a possibility that you can onboard all your cloud if you're multi-cloud hybrid company, if you have the approach to use different cloud, also for the geographical requirement and convenience, like Alibaba Cloud in China also. Uh, it's possible that you can bring 5 different cloud that your organization uses, bring them all together, tag them with which cloud they belong to, what kind of resources they are, and all under one dashboard. You can see the misconfiguration. You can see the misconfiguration also based on identity, based on network, based on different network controls, based on vulnerabilities. So it's basically brings the visibility. That is the biggest the value add for any organization. But then CSPM is also coming. The next gen CSPM and other CSPM tools are also coming with the remediation factor. They are also a term called CWPP, Cloud Workload Protection Platform, that brings the auto remediation feature. So if you find something misconfigured, you can create a policy and you can also auto remediate. So these are the key benefits. If we can go on like 5 more different things, but if to summarize, visibility, misconfiguration, knowing what is not set up right. Also, one of the other important feature is the compliance. You can, one thing is seeing the misconfiguration. The other thing is comparing those misconfiguration with ready-made compliance. If your company is dealing about finances, you need to be, let's say, compliant of PCI DSS. You can go to your CSPM tool, you can toggle on the PCI DSS, and based on the PCI DSS, or if it's health, if you are compliant of, need to be compliant of HIPAA, it could be SIS, NIST, hundreds of compliant are ready-made built in the CSPM tool. You can toggle on the one which is your company is, liable to be compliant of, and then within few hours, or even in some time within few minutes, you will see a wonderful reports with how many controls are there in that particular compliance, how many of them are failing, and you can really track down actual which resource, which cloud is failing for what kind of controls, and then you can really um, so the biggest benefit it brings at the engineering level is the saving the time of research. Usually it takes an engineer for hours to understand which asset and which kind of vulnerability, which CSPM brings in minutes, because they have mostly CSPM have read only access, so they have read only access to a lot more of your environment and resources, and it brings a lot more visibility within a stipulated time, so it saves time. Also, it's a cost.
Nice.
If it saves
Yeah,
time, it's
nice.
also a cost.
There's a cost involved, understand. All right. So, but then when I started with the term
Mm,
CSPM and I read it for the first time, I thought it is the total cloud security posture, let's say everything there. But then as I read through your book, you really make clear that CSPM is just one part of the cloud security ecosystem. So how does CSPM fit into this total picture, and what else
I
is
mean,
needed?
so when it comes to, obviously it really depends on the company and the kind of services you are using. But in general, a typical, let's say, complex environment where there are a lot of services being used, and you are a hybrid environment where, let's say, you have resources on cloud, you have resources in on premise, you have resources in different cloud. They are also communicating um, with multiple cloud. The most important piece is CSPM goes across horizontally to give the visibility. But when it comes to protection of those, there is a different element that is required. It may not be used typically for your SOC team to do the alerting because it's not the incident handling tool. It brings the misconfiguration. It brings almost the more it's also a tool. It's getting evolved day by day. Usually typical old, or let's say first generation CSPM tools, they scan the environment once in 24 hours. So if you have something spin up which has a critical vulnerabilities, there is a chances of that you get to know almost about around 20 after 24 hours or within 24 hours, which is a huge time. But as CSPM is evolving, they are also doing the continuous scan, and you are supposed to get within, let's say, within few hours or sometime within minutes, depending on the scan cycle. But it is still not a, let's say, SIM or so tool to immediately tell you, oh, here is something that you need to fix. So as the whole ecosystem, your CSPM tool needs to be aligned with the existing SIM or SOAR tool. The other thing, it's important for the CSPM tool to be integrated is with your ticketing system. If you are using, let's say, BMC or some other ticketing system to create the misconfiguration issues and assign it to the asset owner or the team, it needs to be aligned. And depending on your how your organization is dealing, is it the typical, let's say, IT service standard like a ITIL feature, then you have a BMC. If you are following agile method, you may have a Jira or Azure DevOps or any other tool through which you are trying to fix the automation, then the integration should be the DevOps tool, something. So um, there, these are whole ecosystem. Other than that, there could be a CASB tool. There's something called CNAPP, Cloud Native Application Protection. That's the whole ecosystem. The Cloud Native Application Protection platform brings all these different ecosystem together. Takes input from CNAPP, takes input from CASB, where your applications are exchanging data from your on-premise to cloud, like OneDrive or native application. So to summarize it, CASB, your ticketing system, your incident handling system, and also as the organization is moving left, shift left approach, infrastructure as a code. So if you are using Terraform or any other tool to automatically spin up your cloud infrastructure, then integration of the CSPM tool at the infrastructure code is also important, which we have discussed separately in detail in the chapters. But these are, like, in short, the whole.
Yeah, I think it's important to know this upfront when you are a CISO yourself, or talking to a CISO, to explain that cloud security posture management is a key ingredient in your security
Sure.
architecture, but you need more when it comes to specific types of protection. And you describe it well in the book, but yeah, I think it's good that we know that upfront. So, with that said, you already briefly hinted about cloud asset
Mm.
inventory. So why is that important in cybersecurity these days?
That's a really, really good question, and it's also really important to understand. Because cloud brings agility, you have a choice to spin up a resource only for, let's say, as low as for few minutes. You can spin up a container that does a specific job for 5 minutes, and then it does something, roll out something and test it, and then it destroys itself. So the life cycle of, let's say, assets in cloud is varying really, really differently, spanning from few seconds to as long as you make it a domain joined full-fledged server. And that is where the problem or the complexity comes in. The typical asset management tool, like a BMC has, and or any other CMDB or the inventory tool that has, it requires some alignment and syncing, and and it becomes really complex to manage with the on-premise assets. You have servers, you have databases, you have things which are designed and built in a way that they are used for a long-term purpose. When you bring assets from cloud, it becomes really challenging. Unless you do it really frequent scan for a few hours and that inventory list is not updated, it is really, really challenging for team to manage. I'll give you an example from my personal life. By the time your tool, maybe you are using, let's say, any scanning tool or anything to fetch those details. By the time, if your team or let's say vulnerability management team is scanning those assets, finding out who is the owner of these assets, defining the vulnerability fixing approach, and reaching out to teams saying that, hey, your assets is vulnerable of this and you need to fix it, patch it. By that time, these assets is not existing anymore. They may have already destroyed. And that's the
Right.
challenge. That's the challenge in the typical asset management. What CSPM does in most of the cases is with the involvement, um, they continuously scan your asset and they always maintain the latest asset inventory list, that too from all different cloud infrastructure. If you have, you just need to and you don't need to onboard the asset every time when somebody is building. You are There is a possibility that you can onboard the tenant of the Microsoft Azure or AWS organization, and you give the read level permission with at the tool level, and it automatically scans every let's say few minutes, and it maintains the a separate dashboard with the latest, you know, assets, and it categorizes them beautifully, whether they are server, whether they're, if they are server, then what kind of server they are, Linux or Windows. If they are domain joined, what is the source of that server? Is it coming from marketplace? Is it coming from your company's golden images? It brings whole lot of details because it gets the read level access, and also maintains the latest list. You can tag those assets as crown jewels, mentioning that they are really critical, they are most important. You can tag that they are test environment, they are development. So you can really prioritize which assets is most important to fix first. So that's one of the really, really key important feature that CSPM brings, that you can really track it. So there is another important challenge: the tagging. When the organization grows really, really big and their cloud infrastructure grows really big, um, it's important to track who owns that assets, and you can enforce tagging as a plan. And when CSPM scan those assets, it also brings those tags, so you understand who is the owner of this particular assets. What you can do, that you can really tag, you can onboard the owner, you can tag that assets with the person saying that, hey, you have vulnerabilities in it, can you fix it? Or you can integrate with your ticketing or your DevOps, Jira, Azure DevOps, whichever tool you use. You can use that DevOps asset to create the ticket or vulnerabilities, and assign it to people that, hey, can you bring this particular assets in your upcoming sprint to fix it because there is a vulnerabilities in the library, and those kind of things. So that's how easy it becomes to track.
Very interesting. Yeah, and I think also the why of cloud asset inventory is from a security perspective. I cannot protect what I don't see, or I cannot secure what I don't know
Two.
that exists. So you need this inventory up to date, like you mentioned, to be able to protect it. I think that is the why when CISOs are asking like, why do we need all of this? It is first of all get eyes in the field, like
Mm,
what's going on in a cloud dynamic, which goes really fast, and then what you can see, we can protect, and what we know that exists,
sure.
we can make better. All right, so great. But then what I also encounter in still many organizations today is that some organizations see cloud as insecure or less secure than on premises. What do you think is the reason for this, and how can we address
Hmm.
this concern?
It's something that we have been talking. It's also a really interesting question to understand that, and whenever somebody asks in some discussion or some, I usually refer this as cloud could be even securer than on-premise if it is set well, and it could be really, really a disaster if it is not set well. The thing is, every cloud provider have defined the shared responsibility model. It's more or less same for every cloud provider, and it is important. Um, at least we are at the time now that it is important that we plan our cloud adoption journey in advance and find out what is worth taking to cloud and how. If you are deciding, because there is always a pro and cons, and doing the analysis from cost versus management, we can go as deep as possible to understand that what are the benefits of cloud, what are the benefit of on-premise, and there is a whole this capex opex perspective to understand. The important thing is to understand the responsibility. In the bottom line, when it comes to identity and data, it's irrespective of whatever system or a service you are using, infrastructure as a service like a virtual machine, platform as a service like a uh, Microsoft Azure managed SQL Server, managed instances, or a software as a service like O365 or any applications. Whichever model you use, the identity and the data and how you expose your data is always your responsibility. By default, Microsoft or any cloud provider do as a raw setup to you, and it is important for you to go ahead and understand your use case. That okay, I've got a house which is well protected. I need to make sure that I'm a tenant of this house. Then what kind of keys I need to put? Where do I keep those keys? Who should I hand it over these keys? And when I'm going out, how should I protect? Or when I'm sharing or allowing somebody to come inside my house, how do I give access? Is it something that I one key that opens everything, kitchen, bedroom, washroom, or should I segment it in a way with the different keys and I will give them the only which somebody is responsible of? So this whole cybersecurity least privilege concept and understanding the responsibility is important. Some people think that when I have handed over my data to cloud, it's completely protected, which is sadly not true. And some people think that it's not protected at all. So I should never move to cloud, which is also not true. It is important to understand this statement. The cloud security is shared responsibility between the cloud provider and the cloud customers.
So basically, when C-level or decision makers are thinking cloud is insecure, what we basically need to elaborate is the shared
True.
responsibility. The provider takes his part, but we as an organization have to take our part. If we don't do that, then cloud can be very insecure. So we have to take our part. And then, like you also mentioned, the fact that you need this constant visibility, constant being up to date, and that's where these tools like
Yeah.
CSPM can help in to really
and
secure
and it's
our
also
environment.
important to understand and learn from the mistakes and the trend. If you go and if somebody reads Gartner report or any research firm report, the trend of where these most breaches is coming from whose responsibility. So more than 95%, and that's a very good, let's say, a point for CISO or a manager's a leadership to make decision on the topic that 95%, more than 95% of the cloud breach happens because of the responsibility lack or misconfiguration at the customer end, not the provider end. It's almost 99% of the uh, chances is that, not the chances, the reality is that the breach happens because something is not configured well at the customer end. They haven't, let's say, protected their keys. They don't have the proper plan that who should have access. Sometimes it is overly permissioned, sometimes it is overtly exposed. So it is important to, and this is where CSPM brings also the visibility, that if your S3 buckets, if your Azure storage account is completely exposed to internet, and you are not able to the thing is, you should be able to figure this out before somebody else figure it out. And CSPM brings that visibility. It categorizes the assets: storage, database, virtual machine, EC2 instances, applications, and it also shows the kind of exposure they have. If they are overly permissioned, if they are overly exposed to internet, you can really track down and understand. So first layer is understanding that the breach happens because of the lack of right set of standardization and configuration at the customer end, and CSPM bridge those gap by bringing the visibility as soon as possible. That's, I think, would be added.
Yeah, clear, clear. That's indeed a very
Mm.
powerful argument there. Now, you also talked a bit about compliance management
Mm.
and governance, which is always on the radar of C-level and board level, even executives and board members. So we're
Yeah.
both living in Europe. You're in France, Paris. I'm in Belgium. We see European directives hitting the market
Mm.
every few months, every year. New one comes active, like NIS 2 is coming out in October or November,
Sure.
I believe. For our American audience, this is not NIST, but NIS 2, the Network and Information
Sure.
Security Directive version 2. How does a CSPM help with compliance management in these cloud
That's
environments?
also another really important question, and that's another key feature of any CSPM tool that it brings. Let's understand how it used to happen, because I have worked for an organization where there was no CSPM tool, and as an engineer, I used to manage. I will go to NIST or SIS compliance website. I will download this whole set of controls within the Excel sheet. I will check each control, go to cloud environment, find out if there is anything missing, and it will take weeks and weeks to finish even 20 or 30% of those controls, and there is a huge chance of error because it's human going and checking each and everything, and it will take months to bring one report to understand where do we fail at which compliance and how it is going to compliance. So it was really hard before something like this exists. What a CSPM tool does is it brings hundreds or at least dozens of compliance engine already in place, compliance benchmark already in place. All those hard work that engineers used to do by themselves to to do the calculation and all, it is already being taken care. What you need to do is doing the right configuration, understanding your industry, your organization's need, and just switching off on or toggling on that particular compliance. Like if you are re- uh, required to be GDPR compliant, which for European every company needs to be, or if somebody is trying to follow CIS benchmark or NIST compliance for, or industry specific like HIPAA, like PCI DSS, all these standard compliance are already there. They are already well cooked. What you need to do is just toggle it on, and within few minutes you will have a dashboard with the report about every assets, every control, explaining where do you where do you stand right now in this particular compliance. You can see your score, like saying that, oh, your score is 54%, which is lower than the industry standard. Generally, industry standard is, let's say, 80% or 85% of SIS or NIST compliance. So it will give you a kind of benchmark. You are lacking um, this much. It saves huge amount of effort from an engineering perspective, also from the leadership perspective, that if somebody asks you, hey, where do you stand in your, you are dealing with, let's say, financial data, where do you stand as per the PCI standard, and you can say we are 85% compliant of PCI DSS just by clicking at the dashboard and saying, and if somebody asks the report, here is the report, here is the controls, and here is the scan happening, and it's not humanly done, so it's, there's no chances of manipulation and changes. There is a clear set of controls set, and it is checking against those controls of your assets and bringing that, let's say, a dashboard, and you can really bring the report
Mhm.
at the, and then you can bring report as per your requirement. For internal assessment, you can bring as deep as possible to track the asset. For executive summary, you can bring the high level report saying that you are compliant, let's say 80% of PCI DSS. And you can also integrate, it brings, most of the CSPM tool also integrate with the data visualization like Grafana or Power BI or anything. So if you have a, if you're a big company where there is a separate department taking care of the reporting and dashboarding, you can integrate your CSPM tool to bring the desired reporting. So that is how CSPM help you in the compliance. Hope that answers your question. uh,
Yeah, that's clear, and I think that's a really powerful argument for CISOs as well to adopt this technology. On the other hand, I think it's also important that we scope it right. Like cloud security posture management is not just public clouds. Some also allow on-premise environments to be included. So you got the hybrid setup. Is that more the norm these days with the tools that they are hybrid cloud
I
supportive?
mean, the market adjusts themselves based on how the trend is. Usually, uh, when CSPM tool is started, they were also on-premise product that you install your CSPM in the on-premise data center. You connect here with the connectors. You push the agent into every servers and everything, and then it gets the visibility. So there were agent-based CSPM. There were agentless CSPM, and now it's morely because every organization is moving very rapidly towards cloud. CSPM is also now offered as a SaaS solution where you can simply onboard your tenant, and you have everything visibility. If you want to really have control over your data, it's possible that you can spin up a particular instance in your own cloud environment where the CSPM is existing. You are hosting the CSPM in your own cloud, and then you are integrating everything. So there are different model, different way of handling. The current trend mostly is the SaaS version of the CSPM, where, but you have the choice to, when you do the POC. We have discussed this really in detail about the POC and a strategy of implementation in the book. You have hundreds of questions. I have also listed them as much as possible in the book, and that's how also the book went on in the length, because we tried to deep dive as an engineer who is doing the POC of the tool. What are the things they should think of? As a leader who is thinking of purchasing, let's say, CSPM tool, and they are doing the balance and checks about, let's say, 5 different tool where there is a debate about budget. There is always a debate of budget for security. So value that tool brings versus the budget. Um, then you see, how do you decide what is worth to to let go, which feature is
Mhm.
worth to let go, and which feature is no, it must have. Those kind of discussion is important, and that's why it's important to understand. It's mostly I think I'm kind of deviated from your question way,
Y-
but
y- Hmm?
Yeah,
But let me rephrase it there, because
yeah,
coming back to the compliance on a CISO level, basically what when you gave the example of your 85% compliant to PCI, for example, of course we need to remember that this is only for the scope in which the CSPM can monitor
mm,
and get the information. If it doesn't have access to your
mm,
on-premise environment, then of course the 85% is just within its scope. So, and then you see the evolution, like you state in the book, that modern CSPMs are hybrid cloud compatible, so they can include
true,
on-premise environments. So your footprint gets bigger. That's good. But then also, what we also need to say to CISOs is, like for NIS2 or some other legal frameworks, are more than just your IT tool stack and IT infrastructure. It's like your vendors, are they also compliant? Are they secure? So your entire supply chain. So when it comes to compliance management, I say a CSPM is really great for your own footprint. But remember, dear CISO, there's more to be compliant with than just your IT
true,
infrastructure.
true, important. It's also, and I've kind of deviated from the topic, but the point, it is important that how much integration CSPM is having on premise cloud. Even in the cloud, for big company, there are, let's say, different tenants, different environment, or when merger and acquisition happens, there are different companies that are being coming into. When there is a carve out happening, things are going out of your organization. In all these cases, you have to be careful. When you say you are 85% compliant or 90% compliant, are you taking every consideration or not? You may have onboarded only one tenant of your Azure, and you may have 5 different tenants for different purposes. So are you bringing everything or not? So these are the things where it is deeply addressed at the audits chapter. I have tried addressing those concerns when we do the audits. CSPM could be a direct tool to help you with the external internal audits. That's another really important aspects. I'm not sure if you have a question on audits or not, but we have CSPM helps a lot in the audits, because then the auditors, you can really give the audit role. Typically it's a role in CSPM tool that you can really give an external auditor a timely based auditor role to CSPM, where they can really come and see a kind of masked uh, assets, so that they don't get to see the much more details or sensitive information, but they get to see high level information of how the controls are being put, how the policies are being put, and how they are compliant of particular PSI. And so it's also helps in elevating the overall audit or audit purposes. It usually takes months for auditors to come and sit with different IT team, different stakeholders, asking those questions, or asking usually in the Excel sheet they fill up, and those answers are usually vague, and sometimes it goes against you as an organization, where you can literally plan, give access to your tool to external or internal auditor as an auditor role. They can go and asset and take those dashboard. They can also go and deep dive, understand how much data set is being taken care in terms of doing those calculations.
Yeah, that's a really good point there that you added. Great. So a CSPM is not only improving your security posture, but it's also preparing you to be compliant, and when there's an effective audit, actually helping and assisting in that audit process. Nice, great points there. Now, just for those who may be new to the field of CSPM, what are some major tools and vendors, and give some names that people can connect it with? This is a CSPM.
Okay, so though in the book I have tried not to be a particular vendor specific book, so I tried writing the vendor agnostic way. Though I have taken few examples which I have really worked with, the tools that I have really worked with, and I have hands-on, or I have done POCs. So there are dozens of tools that I've used. There are CSPM feature and tools offered by cloud providers itself, because they are called cloud native CSPM tools. So because it's your responsibility and they help you offering the tool, they charge you separately for that. it's not their responsibility to protect or configure your let's say identity or data control or the services or the assets that you are using. So they offer CSPM as a service, as a tool, and there are tools from AWS like Security Hub, GuardDuty, or even the config. Config is count as the typical CSPM tool, AWS config, but the most common from the cloud provider is the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. It it integrates with major cloud, AWS and GCP as well, and it's also really, if you are one cloud provider user like a Microsoft Azure, it's really streamlined and it's really easy to just switch on with 30 days trial and use it and see, and if you don't want to use it, toggle it off. But to name a few, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, if you are just one Azure. But apart from that, there are tools from apart from, let's say, cloud provider agnostic, and those are, some of them are like Prisma Cloud from Palo Alto, Orca is Orca Security. Sophos, my previous employer, they have something called Optics. Um, that is a good one. Then there is something, there are small players as well which are like a startup, but they are doing really well. Wiz is another. Uh, what else? There is I recently met in AWS Summit, Lacework. That is, I saw the demo. It was a good tool. And the first CSPM and CASB tool, there is something from Symantec. Symantec is now a part of Broadcom, and they also have something called Symantec Cloud SOC. I'm just recalling while we are
Okay,
talking
nice.
because the kind of tool that I'm working. So
Yeah, sure.
then there is a CASB tool, BitGlass. So now with the trend of, it's also tricky because of the a lot of competition and in the space. CSPM vendors are bringing a lot more features to be a key differentiator, and that's how they are bringing auto remediation features, um, cloud workload. So they are basically, when it started, there has a different terminology for and different tools for separate purposes, CWPP, CSPM, and on blah blah blah. But now, because of the high competition, there are new features being added, and you really need to understand which tool suits your requirement, because there are some baseline feature that we have discussed, compliance, visibility, and asset inventory that every CSPM tool offers. But when it comes to specific requirement, you really need to find out your own use case. What is your suitable? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, great for just naming some names so that we can understand, okay, this is a CSPM coming from these different vendors, cloud native or a cloud agnostic, let's say. Wonderful. Now, one but last question is, or two more questions is DevSecOps. You write about it in your book as well. It's a rising trend. Briefly, in your opinion, what is the biggest difference between DevSecOps and the regular traditional DevOps?
It's really important. Another important question to it's about mindset. Security is journey, and there is no ultimate security, or there's no a goal that you achieve in security and that's it. It's a continuous process, it's a continuous improvement, and it's a continuous effort to protect your resource, your environment. And that brings important topic that when do you want to integrate your security in your life cycle, let's say asset or infrastructure lifecycle. The traditional method with the agile or the waterfall is that you build something, you test, and then you deploy. And there is a problem with that, because when you spend 6 months on a particular project and then you hand it over to test, and then you find security issues, which requires a lot of change at the architecture and design level, let's say, then it's a huge cost. It's really hard to go and make changes something that you have already built. And that's it. That's a mindset, the shift left approach. And this is where DevSecOps comes into a picture, that you have DevOps, development and operations going on. Like let's say a thread intertwisting each other. And you said you used to add security at the end as a node to define. The new approach says that no, instead of two threads, bring one third one and start twisting in a smaller cycle from the day one. Not from the day one when you code, from the day where you have started thinking about the design. If you are planning to go to cloud, adopt a cloud as a journey, you are planning to build cloud native applications, or you host your storage database, or even the server infrastructure, involve security from day one. And this is what DevSecOps is. You involve security at the time of designing, so that the security architect says, hey, your design looks good, your at network security it looks good. What is your identity plan? How do you want users to authenticate? What are the conditional access that you are trying to put? What are your approach to as close as becoming a zero trust approach? And based on your journey, then you decide. And that's the key differentiator of DevOps and DevSecOps. You start involving security at the very first day. So you used to have an infrastructure code which you spin up, then you have a server in place, and then some CSPM tool. And this is really important to understand because it brings huge operational overheads if you don't plan in advance. And I'll give you an example for vulnerability management. Let's say somebody created an infrastructure code to spin up 5 server, and then you they did it. You did not involve security in building those infrastructure code. You build that, you run this code, you have a 5 servers in your environment running, and then your CSPM recognize that, and then you find out to fix, let's say, misconfiguration and that particular server maybe it's exposed to internet. Then you fix those 5 servers. There is over permission, you fix that, and you keep on doing unless you don't go and fix the code. And that's the key differentiator in the DevSecOps. So, and this is also where CSPM helps, that you get to know that the problem is in your code. By default, you are exposing your server to the internet. By default, you are giving right access to everybody, particular group. By default, your storage is exposed, not encrypted. And if you don't go and fix that, then whenever that code will run, this will bring 5 different servers which is exposed, and you keep on fixing. Your operational team is continuously involved in fixing, and it's never ending game. And then learn from it and build the DevSecOps approach, involve somebody from security at that level, and tell them that in this code, enable this encryption, minimize this identity, this IAM control to have only read permission, protect these keys, reduce the attack surface, and keep that in mind, and then develop the code. And then you run the code, you have already hardened server, and you have already hardened small attack surface.
Yeah, that's powerful, especially now in these in this day and age where on cloud many things are deployed using scripts, infrastructure as code, and so it's an immutable workload. So if that has an issue, a security issue, you have to go back to the source, namely the script, and then you can replace it. Otherwise, you just indeed keep fixing it while the source and the root cause has not been solved. So great point. Yeah, great point there. Now, as we are heading towards
now with the CSPM tool, they are bringing this shift left feature already. Many of the CSPM tool, there's a dedicated section, there's a dedicated feature, and some of these CSPM tool are now, because of competition, not charging or not making it additional charge. It's a free of cost where you can include your Terraform or whichever infrastructure code you are utilizing. You can include so that your CSPM can scan the script before even um, spinning some servers. So those are really also a good added value from CSPM nowadays. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's even the almost the farthest point left you can go. I think one more could be within Copilot. Like while you're
Yeah,
coding,
Copilot
that
Plus. Yeah.
Copilot something already says like here is a security issue. So, but really nice. Now, as we're heading towards the end of the podcast, two questions briefly. How is the book doing, like sales wise and feedback
Yeah,
wise?
I haven't gotten the this quarter's report yet because that's the first quarter full fledged. I would check with the publisher. I don't have the exact figures in detail, but I think it's doing pretty well. I have seen people from community posting or sending screenshots to my LinkedIn saying that they purchased. I have seen many of my colleagues also from leadership. They have purchased from my previous managers, previous leaders. They have purchased the book and they have sent to me a screenshot. So I think it's doing pretty good. Yeah.
It's actually a timely book because with all the hacks and the cloud adoption that keeps growing, it is a book at the right time. So I really enjoyed it. Thanks. And then last question for you: what is the future for you, Kamal? What's a new book or a LinkedIn course or teaching training? What's up for you?
So, thank you for asking this. I didn't know that the book writing is such an exhaustive process until I get into it. First, I was thinking, oh, I will write by myself, self-publish it. But I thought, oh, nobody knows me. Let's work with some publisher too. That was the best decision. But it was also an exhaustive process to write a book but it let you learn the whole process. So I may not take now this much of time to write it. It took whole year to finish this book, this 400 plus pages. No such plan, at least not this year, to write a book. But I do have some potential collaboration with LinkedIn, probably a LinkedIn course. But whenever I get a chance in the weekend or so, I do run some boot camp or provide training. So training and teaching that we didn't touch about is something that it started as a need for me when I was in college. That is the only source of supporting my education. So I started tutoring math, computer science, like C++ languages. And at one point, I always wanted to be a teacher or professor. So, but then I realized, no, I need to get more experience. So I went to industry. But this little teacher inside always remain alive. So whenever I get a chance, I get to teach. I do. I'm an active Microsoft certified trainer for like MCT for almost 5 years now, and yeah, I get to teach, train, and that's in the platter. It's always helping. Yeah.
Nice. Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, the other day I was at a potential client and it was the CEO, and he said, what we're looking for are not just long life students, but long life teachers. And that's part of our DNA, he said. So I think that's a good one. You always have to not only study, but try to teach
Yeah,
others as
like
well.
anything, the new certifications or anything that comes related to security. First thing when I see that, oh, let me learn, the passion about learning and getting certified to validate ourselves that, okay, at least I can say that I have some baseline understanding of the subject. But in the background, it always the one question: how well do I learn this so that I can provide training on this topic? So, yeah, so
Exactly.
that's the one.
That's a
Yeah.
great mindset. And with that, that's a great way to end the podcast. Thank you very much, Kamal, for joining this and sharing your insights. I'll also place a link to your book that people can order it. And I'll also add some contact details for you, like your LinkedIn page, that people can reach out to you if they have questions. So thank you very
Thank
much
you,
for joining today.
Netrophatics. I thoroughly enjoyed conversation and speaking to you. And this is first time we are collaborating or doing this discussion. Looking forward. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Blue Dragon Podcast, a podcast dedicated to IT decision makers and helping them gain perspective of what's going on in cloud, AI, and security. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe to the channel so you'll be up to date all the time when new episodes come out. Your support really means a lot to me. Thank you very much. Have a great day and see you next time.